data and found major flaws. And this guy's being kind of gentle with major flaws, because listen, in many instances, Bert appeared to have simply fabricated data, describing subjects who never existed. This is a scientist. This is a psychologist. He also apparently borrowed older data from obscure sources, liberally modifying figures to suit his aims. Today, Bert's work has been almost entirely discredited. Now, these are things that they admit to. Imagine all the ones that are happening that they're not quite as important to people and not quite as big a thing, and yet maybe not even have been discovered yet, where people have done these frauds to make what they want to appear right, right. And I suspect there's a whole lot of that still going on today. Let's go to one more. This one is in Newsweek, and it's about our brain. And some of you should be able to remember this. The writer says, as recently as a decade ago, proposing, and these guys are proposing something that will sound so obvious to us, that you can actually think and your mind can change throughout your life. But, he said, recently as a decade ago, proposing that an adult brain could be rewired for compassion, or anything else for that matter, without experiencing a life-altering epiphany, would have been career suicide for a neuroscientist. And let me say this again, scientists are under heavy pressure to go along with the status quo. And any scientist that speaks out against something like everybody knows to be true, evolution, is very likely going to lose a lot of prestige and a lot of grants. And so it takes a lot of courage for people to speak out. Now, he's saying 10 years ago, if these people had said what these scientists are now saying, they would have been, it would have been career suicide. Not anymore. Experts are overthrowing the old dogma that by the ripe old age of 3, the human brain is relatively fixed in form and function. Do you remember that? I do. I remember people teachers talking about, you really need to be careful about your little child, how you're training him up to he's 3 years old, because he's ruined afterwards if you haven't done things right. And they really taught this kind of stuff. Well, you know, I'm just a dumb country boy, and I even knew that was stupid, because I'd read my Bible and I understood, and I knew my own life. I understood that people can change all the way through their lives. You can have somebody that's 70 or 80 years old that all of a sudden discovers the truth, and wham, their life changes, and they're baptized into Christ. Things can happen. The amazing thing is human beings, if they use their common sense, wouldn't believe any of this stuff, but they don't. They just take these people at their word. And so many educators believe that your brain is basically fixed by the time you're 3 years old. Now, he goes on to speak about it. This, and he quotes here, he gives us a term, neurological nihilism, as psychiatrist Norman Deutsch calls it in his recent book, The Brain That Changes Itself, spread throughout our culture, even stunning our overall view of human nature. Since the brain could not change, human nature, which emerges from it, seemed necessarily fixed and unalterable as well. You remember these psychologists talking about criminals, that something happened to them when they were a baby, and they were fixed, they couldn't help it, and they went out and did these horrible deeds, but they're not responsible for it, because they were wired this way, pre-programmed this way. Oh yeah, I can remember all of that being taught. But now, all of a sudden, they realize that isn't true. Who knows what damage it did up to that time? But the dogma is wrong, the article goes on to say, the nihilism groundless. And yet it was taught for decades that it was true. And people believed it, and people acted accordingly. San Francisco neuroscientist says, we now know that the qualities that define us at one moment in time come from experiences that shape the physical and functional brain, and that continue to shape it as long as we live. Well, how about that? I think we could have told them that, but we don't have PhDs, and they wouldn't have believed us. Yes, our brains can change. Our lives we can make decisions throughout our lives, and we can change our mind on things. And everybody knows that from experience. But if a scientist can't prove it by their methods, then it doesn't exist. And this is one of the flaws of science, or at least scientists. Anyway, I want to read one more little excerpt from Newsweek that doesn't have anything to do with that, but it kind of goes along the lines of what we're talking about. A sidebar they've got over at the side says, glimpses of a cosmic creation. And they've got this beautiful scene of space. It really irks me, and I hope it does you, that atheists who believe in evolution use words that talk about God. Glimpses of a cosmic creation. Well, how did a cosmic creation come about? Must have had a creator. But now listen to what this one physicist from Case Western Reserve University says, one of the greatest intellectual triumphs, one of our greatest intellectual triumphs, is realizing that the universe had a beginning. Like they should have come to Bible Lab and let our little kids told them that. But the scientists have figured these things out. Eventually, given time, billions of years probably, scientists will figure out there is a God and the Bible's true. Well, we haven't got time to wait for them to do that. They're pretty ignorant people. Anyway, let's go on and deal with what started it all in the first place. I think we can get through this tonight. You've heard of natural selection, right? If you haven't, of course, that's from Darwin. Darwin came up with a term talking about what he had discovered. And again, I'm going to read from Encarta so that I'm getting everything right. In his book on the origin of species by means of natural selection, published in 1859, Darwin described the evolution of life as a process of natural selection. Have you ever wondered about where they get these terms? Natural, of the earth. Selection, requiring some kind of thought by some kind of being somewhere. Selection is choosing. Who's choosing? Earth is choosing. Now, these people have a God. It's called Mother Earth. Somehow they've got the Mother Earth with intelligence actually doing all of these things. It's choosing what will evolve and what will not evolve and how it will do. So he's figured all that out. Life, he suggested, is a competitive struggle to survive, often in the face of limited resources. Living things must compete for food and space. They must evade the ravages of predators and disease while dealing with unpredictable shifts in their environment, such as changes in climate. Darwin offered that with a given population in a given environment, certain individuals possess characteristics that make them more likely to survive and reproduce. These individuals will pass these critical characteristics on to their offspring. The number of organisms with these traits increases as each generation passes on the advantageous combination of traits. Outmatched, individuals lacking the beneficial traits gradually decrease in number, and slowly, Darwin argued, natural selection tips the balance in a population toward those with the combination of traits or adaptations best suited to their environment. Let me say this first of all in no uncertain terms. Adaptation is not evolution. And this is where they get so many people fooled. Do animals adapt? No one doubts that. Of course they do. What Darwin did was he went out to the Galapagos Islands and he noticed that finches, and by the way, he recognized them right away as finches, but finches on one island differed slightly from finches on other islands. They had adapted. Some of them had curved beaks because it helped them to get the food on their island. Some of them had straight beaks because on their island that helped to do that. Is there anybody anywhere that has a problem with that and hasn't seen adaptation at work? But somehow Darwin jumped from adaptation to evolution. That the birds would change from what? To alligators, to dinosaurs, to apes, to people. That isn't adaptation. That's an imagination running riot with no evidence whatsoever. But certainly they adapt. But let me show you something. You may or may not have seen the nature shows about the Arctic fox. But let me tell you, the Arctic fox, they're both Arctic foxes you're looking at there. And the only difference is the time of year. In the wintertime, the brown Arctic fox turns white so that he can hide from his predators. Is this evolution? Well, then it's devolution when he turns back to brown, I guess. He's going backwards. Isn't it funny? And of course, it happens over one season, not billions of years. And it keeps happening time after time after time. Some scientists took a bunch of lizards off one island and they put it on another island quite a ways away. And in the space of 14 years, those lizards had adapted to their new environment, part of which required them to have shorter legs so that they could have traction in certain areas. It made it easier for them. You know what that tells me? What a wonderful God we have that created animals with the ability to adapt to the environment. And of course, we all adapt all the time. We know how to put on a coat when it's cold and take it off when it's hot. This is not evolution. This is adaptation, and nobody disagrees with it I know of. And so for men to jump from Darwin's idea of adaptation to billions of years, we turn into humans when we used to be apes. There's absolutely no foundation for that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about evolution itself and ask some questions. You know, if you don't have a PhD or two, you're asking a question is considered impertinent. I mean, these people don't know anything about